You ever wonder why, when you present someone with a clear, verifiable truth, they just refuse to see it? It's not always about being stubborn or uninformed, no? There's a whole psychology at play here, a really fascinating process of denial that can lead someone to build a completely altered reality. Today, we're going to dig into that process and the specific patterns people use to fool not just others, but themselves.
All right, let's dive in. Here's our roadmap. We're going to start with that moment a challenging truth hits us. Then we'll trace the psychological path down the rabbit hole of denial. We'll look at two powerful parables that illustrate this. Then we'll break down the 6 core methods used to manipulate truth. And finally, we'll talk about how to spot this stuff in the wild.
So, let's begin right at that moment of impact. A profound truth shows up, and it directly challenges a story we've built our life around. You know that feeling? It creates this immediate internal clash. It's a moment of real tension, maybe even a little guilt, where our comfortable world suddenly has to reckon with an uncomfortable fact.
I mean, our minds are fundamentally wired for stories. That's how we make sense of the world, right? From the time we're kids, we learn about good guys, bad guys, and a clear moral. But then, a verifiable truth comes along, and it demands a total reset. It basically asks us to ditch the cozy narrative and start over with just the facts. And let's be honest, that is not always an easy thing to do.
Okay, so how does that initial uh-oh feeling of discomfort morph into full-blown self-deception? Let's trace that psychological journey and see how resisting a single truth can end up reshaping someone's entire reality.
What's so wild is that there's a clear path here. It starts with that pang of guilt. But if you resist it, if you lie or deny it, that feeling gets a little weaker. You do it again, it gets weaker still. Before you know it, your mind starts building up these walls, these excuses and rationalizations, until the lie actually starts to feel normal. The moral alarm bells just stop ringing, and you become kind of numb, living in a new reality you've built for yourself.
The source material we're looking at, which is an analysis of the Quran, has a specific name for this state, a disease of the heart. Now, this isn't a physical illness, or even what we'd call a typical psychological disorder. It's described as a spiritual condition where a person, through their own repeated denials, actually damages their ability to recognize truth. Their moral compass gets bent out of shape.
To really make this idea click, the Quran uses these powerful parables. And these aren't just simple stories. They're more like psychological profiles that perfectly illustrate this state of mind. We're going to look at 2 of them because they reveal 2 very, very different kinds of hypocrisy. So this first story is about someone who actively creates their own light. Think about that. They build their own narrative, their own version of reality that seems to make everything clear. But here's the catch. The light is self-made, and it's flimsy. The moment a real test comes along, that fire is just snuffed out, and they're left completely in the dark, unable to see a thing.
So, the crucial point here is that this fire is just an illusion of clarity that they've built for themselves. It perfectly represents a kind of intellectual hypocrisy. The person who acts like they have all the answers, but in reality has just built a fragile, false world that shatters under the first bit of pressure from the truth.
Now, this second parable, this one flips the script completely. In this case, the truth isn't something they've made up, it's an external force that comes crashing down on them like a massive storm. It brings moments of incredible clarity, that's the lightning, but it also brings terrifying moral demands, and that's the thunder. And this is just a brilliant illustration of a totally different pattern of deception. These are the people who engage with truth only when it suits them. You know, when a flash of lightning shows them a shortcut to something they want, they'll happily walk by its light. But the second the thunder of moral responsibility or personal sacrifice starts to roar, they jam their fingers in their ears and hide until the inconvenient part is over. This slide really lays it all out, the 2 different profiles. The kindled fire person is all about the pride of actively creating a fake reality. The rainstorm person is all about the fear and opportunism of only dealing with truth when it's easy. One person builds a false world, the other just hides from the real one.
Okay, this brings us to the absolute core of this whole explainer. How exactly does this manipulation of truth work, especially in that kindled fire example of intellectual hypocrisy? Well, the source identifies 6 specific, powerful patterns for twisting reality.
So here's the toolkit. Let's run through them.
First, you can exaggerate a small piece of the truth until it seems like the whole story. Second, you can just hide the parts that don't fit your narrative. Third, you can mislabel something with an emotionally charged word that's not quite accurate. Fourth is misrepresenting what something actually means. And the last 2 are a classic pair. Ripping a truth completely out of its original context and then pasting it into the wrong context to make it say something it never meant.
And this is the critical point.
The most effective deceptions, the really sneaky ones, aren't built on total lies. They're built around a little kernel of truth. The source gives a perfect example. The Quranic phrase, "Don't go near prayer." Now, someone could present that as a fact, but they're deliberately hiding the very next part which says, "while you are intoxicated." See? By hiding that one crucial piece of context, they create a complete falsehood. We see this all the time. A single statistic is yanked out of a report to prove a political point, or a complex scientific finding gets a scary, misleading headline. The fact itself is real, but the way it's presented is a total deception.
So, why does any of this matter to us now, thousands of years later? Well, let's connect these ancient principles to the absolute flood of information we are all dealing with every single day. This is the question, isn't it? Whether you're listening to a political speech, scrolling through social media, or even reading a news report, these 6 patterns are everywhere. A statistic is ripped from its context, an opponent's words are misrepresented. A complex issue gets mislabeled with a simple, emotionally loaded term. These tricks are timeless because they prey on our basic human psychology. And ultimately, the source frames this whole struggle in such a fascinating way. It says that arrogance against the truth isn't really about defying some abstract, distant authority. It's about actively working against the mission of truth, which is defined as the betterment of humanity, establishing peace, justice, and prosperity for everyone. So when you resist truth, you're really resisting the collective good.
And that's the thought I want to leave you with. Learning to spot these 6 patterns in the world around us is an absolutely vital skill today. But the real challenge, the place where real growth happens, is turning that lens around on ourselves and recognizing when we're the ones tempted to resist or hide from or twist the truth just because it makes us feel uncomfortable.